Hey, hello. My name is Tom Simon. I'm San Francisco Bureau Chief with MIT Technology Review, and I'm pleased to be moderating this next panel. We're about to take a journey to the far future of artificial intelligence. We have three panelists here who will take it in turns to present their vision of where we're going and what we should be concerned or excited about. And after that, we'll have hopefully a civil discussion about those ideas. And well, okay, we'll see how that goes. Afterwards, we'll have a civil discussion about those ideas, and all of you will have a chance to join in as well. So first of all, Stuart Russell here is going to take the floor.
Okay, so I'm going to zip through this. We have a lot of stuff to cover, the whole future of the human race. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the assumption that AI will eventually be making better decisions in a broad sense than human beings. They'll be able to take into account much more information than we can. They'll be able to read everything that the human race has ever written and every television program the human race has ever produced and all the rest. And they'll be able to look further ahead into the future. So just like AlphaGo can look further ahead than the human world champion at Go, you take that and you spread it out to the world rather than just the Go board, and that's the situation that we will be facing. So this is a good thing because everything we have, I mean, just look around you, right? Everything we have, everything in your life that you value that's good, possibly besides your children and your friends, is the product of your intelligence. And if we have more intelligence, then we can do more of the same, right? We can get a much better civilization. And this can't be anything but a step change in our civilization. And arguably, it's already underway. So, you know, when we look back from the distant future, it'll look like a step, although we're seeing it happen over time. And some people have argued that it might be the single biggest event in human history. Now, there's also a few downsides. Some people talk about killer robots being used in warfare. That might be considered a downside. Happy to talk about that later. Some people talk about the end of employment, which would be a significant change and possibly lead to an extended period of unhappy people. And some people talk about the end of the human race. So I'm going to talk about that. And you might ask, well, okay, I just said better AI is great. Right? It's going to give us really increase the capability of the civilization. What could possibly be wrong with that? Well, here's a statement. If a machine can think, it might think more intelligently than we do. And then where should we be? Even if we could keep the machines in a subservient position, for instance, by turning off the power at strategic moments, and I'll come back to that point later, we should, as a species, feel greatly humbled. And this new danger is certainly something which can give us anxiety. Okay, so this is not some wild-eyed loony who doesn't know anything about AI. This is Alan Turing in 1951. Okay, so when people criticize Elon Musk or Bill Gates, say, oh, those guys don't know anything about AI, I just say, no, they're just repeating things that Alan Turing said a lot earlier. So this is a fairly inchoate fear. We might call this the gorilla problem, right? The gorillas have a problem with humans. They made, 20 million years ago, they made a species, eventually, that was more intelligent than them, and now they regret it. And here they are having a meeting to discuss that problem. This is sort of like the Bears 2017 of the gorilla, and they're pretty unhappy, as you can see. But actually, there's a more specific problem, which was pointed out somewhat later. So if we use to achieve our purposes a mechanical agency with whose operation we cannot interfere effectively, we had better be quite sure that the purpose put into the machine is the purpose which we really desire. So that's a more specific kind of problem, that if you put the wrong purpose in, and this was stated by Norbert Wiener in a paper in 1960. So as most of you know, Norbert Wiener was sort of the founder of modern automation, cybernetics, and eventually control theory. But you could also attribute this to King Midas sometime in the dim and distant past, the legendary past. because Midas said, okay, this is what I want. He got exactly what he said, and then he was sort of faced with this irreversible problem that his food and drink and relatives were all turning into gold, and he died in misery and starvation. So it's been clear to humanity throughout recorded history, and this same myth comes up in many different civilizations, that getting what you say you want can be catastrophic. And the third wish to every genie is, please undo the first two wishes. So this is, I think, a more specific version of the problem that Turing raised. And we call this nowadays value misalignment, that we're putting objectives into the machine that are not, in fact, aligned with the objectives that we truly have. So that's the problem. And you might say, okay, well, let's go look at all the disciplines that do this kind of optimization stuff and see what they say. And the answer is pretty much they say nothing. They say, look, yeah, someone else's job to figure out what the objective should be. And then we'll put it in and we'll do the optimization part. And that doesn't work so well. And then Steve Alejandro wrote a nice paper called Basic AI Drives, where he pointed out that it's not just the misspecification that's the problem. It's that if you give a machine any objective, even just something as simple as fetching the coffee, right? A machine that's sufficiently knowledgeable and capable, right, a super intelligent machine, understands that you can't get the coffee if you're dead. So if I want one thing that you take away from this, it's that you can't get the coffee if you're dead. And so that machine will do anything to defend itself against any possible risk of being switched off, which is exactly what Turing thought the solution might be, that we turn off the power. But in fact, it's not as simple as that, because a sufficiently intelligent machine will already have anticipated that, just like AlphaGo already anticipates all the moves that you could possibly make. And so saying you can just turn off the power is like saying, well, you can just beat AlphaGo at Go, right? You can't. It's not that simple. And so if you have a system that has then these derived goals of self-preservation and value misalignment, then you get exactly what Arthur C. Clarke pointed out in 2001, The Space Odyssey, right? That you end up with this sort of chess match for the world. And we tend to lose chess matches with machines on a regular basis. And it's not coincidental, I think, that early on in the movie, he has Dave playing chess against Hal, and Hal sort of treats Dave as kind of a pet. Well, Dave, your game's really doing quite well. You're improving, right? Okay, so a lot of people say, well, this is all rubbish, right? People who say this are raving lunatics. They're irresponsible. They don't know what they're talking about. And one of the first things you hear is it'll never happen. Right? We're sort of strange for people in the AI community who have spent 60 years saying, of course we're going to reach human-level AI. Don't listen to any of those philosophers and those other people who say we're never going to get there, because they don't know what they're talking about. Right? All of a sudden, as soon as it becomes even remotely possible, we say, oh, no, we didn't mean any of that. No, of course we're never going to reach human-level AI unless I'm writing a funding proposal. Now, this is pretty rash, right? So you're betting on the lack of ingenuity of the human race. Not a good bet. So in 1933, this is Ernest Rutherford, most famous nuclear physicist of his time, on September 11th. He said that basically it's impossible to ever get the energy out of atoms that we know to be in there. You know, they already knew E equals mc squared. They could measure the amount of energy that was stored in the atoms and could be released, but they said there's no possibility we're ever going to release it. And then this is Leo Szilard, who read about that speech, and he invented the neutron-induced nuclear chain reaction the next morning. So don't bet against human ingenuity, and don't say it's never going to happen, and don't bet the future of the human race on that bet. It's just not sensible. There's a lot of other versions of these arguments and lots of other stupid arguments. I have a list of about 15, and I keep thinking, okay, no one is going to come up with any more stupid arguments not to pay attention. I was in an ACM webinar just the other day, and someone came up with number 16, which is that, calculators are superhuman arithmetic, but they haven't taken over the world, so there's nothing to worry about. I just feel like there's a psychological block that's causing people to produce arguments that you know, a 5-year-old can debunk as to why there's no reason to pay attention to this question. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all this list, blah, 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 blah. You know, particularly pernicious one is don't mention the risks. Okay, yes, there are risks to the human race, but we shouldn't mention them because that might be bad for funding, right? I mean, and what happens? I mean, look what happened to the nuclear industry, right? They covered up the risks throughout the 1950s and 1960s. It's perfectly safe, it's perfectly clean, it's going to be free, and that led to Chernobyl, right? It led to a culture where people who were concerned about risk were dismissed, and there wasn't enough attention paid in the technology to, you know, enough fail-safes and careful engineering and systems management, and we had Chernobyl, and that destroyed the nuclear industry. So by covering up the risks, you actually destroy the very industry that you're trying to preserve. So I think it's much better to do what I think, for example, the partnership on AI is now doing, which is the industry consortium of 5 and I think now 6 large IT corporations, is to say, yes, there are risks, and yes, we are going to address them. We're going to fund research. We're going to do the right thing. Okay, so assuming that you now agree with me and you don't want to be number 17 on the list of stupid arguments not to pay any attention, your next question is quite reasonable. Right, you agree, what are we going to do about it? Right? It's very hard to know what to do about controlling systems that don't yet exist. Super intelligent machines are not there yet. How do we control something that we don't even know what it looks like? Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So we started this new center called the Center for Human Compatible AI, which is a deliberately insulting title to the rest of the field. And the goal is to figure out how to make AI systems that are provably beneficial, that in a mathematically provable sense, do not do stuff that makes you unhappy. Okay? Which is not an easy thing because we don't really know, as we saw with King Midas, exactly what we want. And there are a lot of other organizations. There's research centers. There's the major funding organizations. NSF and DARPA are very interested in this partnership on AI that I mentioned, and the professional societies have all sort of woken up to this question and are starting to take it seriously. So what I propose is that there are 3 simple ideas which I think will be helpful in this goal. So the first thing is that unlike Asimov, I don't believe that the robot should have any goals of its own whatsoever, including self-preservation. So in Asimov's laws, the robot is allowed to preserve its own existence as a fundamental goal. I don't believe this is true. The only objective is to maximize the realization of human values, and if that means committing suicide like Tars did in the movie Interstellar, then great. That's absolutely what it should do. But the real point, the main innovation, I think, is that the robot does not know what those are. There is explicit uncertainty in the machine about what the human values are that it's supposed to be optimizing. And then that's not, I mean, that gives you a certain margin of safety, but it doesn't make the robot useful because, of course, if the robot has no idea what you want, then it's never going to do anything that you like. It's going to do nothing at all. And so the robot can learn, and it learns primarily from human behavior, which is revealing of human preferences in a very specific sense that I'll get to. So that means that there's this value alignment process that the robot, by observing human behavior, can gradually align its values, reduce that uncertainty, and in the limit, will know what humans want and will act in accordance with those values, and so it's provably beneficial. So there's a technology already that's been around for about 20 years called inverse reinforcement learning, which is about how you learn an objective by observing the behavior of an agent that is trying to optimize that objective. And this turns out to be a very effective kind of learning because the objective is a much more succinct description that predicts what the agent is going to do compared to just trying to copy the behavior itself, which is very fragile and very dependent on context and so on. So it turns out we need a slight generalization of that because we don't just want the robot to be observing the human through a one-way mirror, so to speak. Right? The human and the robot are in the same environment, so it actually turns it into a 2-player game where the human has the value function. They know it in the sense that they can act according to it, but they may not be able to make it explicit. And the robot doesn't know it but wants to maximize it. And when you solve these games, you can come up with a Nash equilibrium and solve the games. then you can see that, in fact, the human will change their behavior in order to speed up the robot learning so that the robot can become useful as quickly as possible to the human. So let me just talk about one particular application of that framework, the off-switch problem. So going back to Turing's idea of just turning off the power, right? Here's the drawback, that the robot knows it can't fetch the coffee if it's dead, and so it will have an incentive to immediately disable its own off-switch, right? So all robots, in fact, come with an off-switch by law, if they're capable of inflicting any harm on humans, and they will have an incentive to disable that as quickly as possible. So that's a problem. How can we prevent it? And the answer is, don't give the robot a fixed objective, right? Leave the robot uncertain about what the underlying true objective are. You can include coffee as a positive term in the value function, but a lot of other stuff may be unknown. And when you do that, the robot thinks to itself, okay, if I take an action that the human doesn't like, in fact, because of my ignorance, I may do something that makes the human unhappy. If the human switches me off, that will be beneficial to the human, right? Even though I don't know what the human wants, if the human switches me off, that's because I'm doing something they don't like, even though I don't know it, right? So that, in some sense, the human is providing information by the choice to switch the robot off about what the human really wants, and therefore the robot has an incentive. This is a mathematical theorem. The robot has an incentive to allow itself to be switched off. And a corollary is that a robot that's designed in that way is provably beneficial to the human, because it won't do things, it will typically sort of, in some sense, ask first, right, before it does any action that might not be beneficial to the human. Okay, so this is a new theme in AI, oddly enough. We've had uncertainty in all kinds of other parts of the AI system for almost 4 decades now. It's been a front and center theme in AI, but not in objectives. And there is a technical reason for that, that if you formulate decision problems in the standard way, for example, as Markov decision problems or partially observable Markov decision problems, optimal control problems, then uncertainty in the objective actually doesn't make any difference to the optimal policy, because you just integrate it out and you act exactly as if you had the mean objective rather than an uncertain objective. But that's only true if the environment doesn't provide more information about what the actual objective is. So if the environment can provide objectives, information about the objectives, then uncertainty really does matter, and you get completely different optimal policies in that case. One source of information, as I mentioned, is observable human actions, and another source is reward signals, that if you set up a traditional reinforcement learning framework where something is providing a reward, as in AlphaGo, right? When AlphaGo wins one of its practice games, it gets a +1. When it loses, it gets a -1. So that reward is communicating information to the robot about what the underlying objective that it's supposed to be achieving might be. Okay. Now that reinforcement learning setting turns out to have a bug called wireheading, and this was observed actually in rats and in humans. That if you have an environment that produces reward signals and there is any possibility of taking control of the mechanism that generates those signals, then the optimal policy is to take control of it and feed yourself a maximal reward all the time. Okay, and this has been shown to happen with rats. They will, if the rat can stimulate its own brain pleasure centers, it will do that indefinitely until it dies of starvation. And apparently humans will do that too, but they don't usually run the experiment that long. But they will certainly go an entire day without eating or drinking, just pressing the button, stimulating their pleasure centers. And this is a real problem, and it comes from the reward signal generating mechanism being part of the environment as opposed to being sort of outside and fed in by God, as it is in the standard MDP setting. So it turns out that with this framework that I've been describing, we can actually solve this problem by reformulating reinforcement learning so that the signal is not an actual reward, but is merely evidence about what some underlying reward function might be. And then if you mess with that generating mechanism, all you're doing is losing information, right? So there's no purpose in hijacking a reward mechanism, because you then become less able to optimize the true underlying reward. And so that new mathematical framework avoids wireheading. So, just ran out of battery. Yeah. All right, I'll yell, unless we can turn on the other mic. Okay, now it's on. All right, good. So this means that we made a start on coming up with, if you like, template designs for provably beneficial AI systems. And in the long run, what we're going to do is essentially ingest all available information that can help us learn what the human value function or the human value functions are. And that includes everything that's ever been written down, every movie that's ever been made. It's all about people doing things and other people being upset about it. So there's a massive amount of information out there about what really matters. There's also an incentive to do this not in the long distant future when we have super intelligent AI systems, but very soon, because we're going to have systems, in fact, maybe we already are having systems where AI systems making bad choices result in serious costs to people and corporations. For example, if you look at the Google photo classification snafu when they classified some people as gorillas, you can very clearly point to the problem, right? It was that their misclassification cost matrix, what we call the loss matrix, said that misclassifying any object of type A as any object of type B there's the same negative cost for all A and B, and that simply is false. So they wrote down a false loss matrix and then optimized it. Whereas, in fact, what they should have done is at least be uncertain about what the loss matrix is, and then maybe figured out more evidence for that, what the loss matrix should be. So we could get situations, if people are not careful, right, we'll get situations that will set back the AI industry, just like Chernobyl, for decades, if we don't get value alignment right in settings like domestic robots, personal assistants, and so on. There are some reasons why this is a difficult problem, when I don't like pessimism, so we're going to say working hard, which is that humans are really complicated. Right? We are not optimizers in any meaningful, interesting sense. It's not even clear that each of us has a consistent value function. But as a working hypothesis, we'll say that we approximately have a value function, but we're not very good at optimizing it. And you also have to deal with the fact that we are very heterogeneous. The fact that in the real world we have to trade off values between people. We can't make everybody maximally happy. And so there are all these complicated problems that philosophers and economists and sociologists have grappled with for decades. And so it's not going to be an easy thing for the AI community to work all this out. And I recommend that we do this in practical projects in the near term on things like intelligent personal assistants, on the smart home, where alignment of the system with the values of the individual consumer is all important for the product to be actually desirable. Okay, so there's a lot of questions we still have to figure out. What I really want to do is is actually to eliminate what currently exists as a divide between the AI community and the AI safety community. Right? In civil engineering, there is no divide. The people who design bridges, the idea that your bridge shouldn't fall down is just part of the meaning of the word bridge, right? And there isn't a separate bridge safety community separate from the bridge design community. It's just intrinsic to what they do, and it should be intrinsic to what the AI community does, now that there's a chance that AI systems will actually work. So a lot of other questions I'm not going to go through, but just come back to something Norbert Wiener said, that this problem is incredibly difficult, because we're trying to decide what to do now about a problem that is going to be realizing itself decades in the future. But we have no choice. We have to do the best that we can to try to get it right now. Thank you.
So the wireless mic is broken, which is a shame because I planned on pacing. But we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. Great. I really liked Stuart's kickoff. I actually think this is an incredibly laudable and important goal of understanding. That's going to be, I could do that, but then I'm going to turn to Chris Rock, which also will just be pacing and yelling. It would go from pacing to pacing and yelling. So we don't want to do that. I'll be civil. Or I'll try. So before I begin, actually, this talk is a collection of some thoughts based on some conversations I've been having with a few friends over the past couple weeks, notably Aram Harrow from MIT, Ali Rahimi from Google Research, and Chris Wiggins at Columbia. They really shaped and influenced what I'm about to say, so if it's too inflammatory, their fault. But no, I don't think I want to be too inflammatory. So Stuart mentioned that there are these guys out there, like Elon Musk. I don't think Stuart would say it this way, but Elon would say, when you have ultra intelligent, oops, sorry. Do you need something? Go ahead. So this is a famous quote. You can find this in many places. He actually says this all the time. So Elon does seem to have a play button of 5 or 6 things that he's going to say depending on the topic. And in this case, it's the question of, if you have ultra intelligent AI, we'd be so far below them in intelligence that we'd be like a pet. I think when Elon envisions this and what he kind of thinks behind OpenAI is that you would have this kind of malevolent beast that's going to be super intelligent, and we'll be lucky if we get to be the pet. But what I want to argue in this talk is actually that we are already the pet of AI. We are already he's completely right. And the AI is not super intelligent. Actually, the AI is very dumb. And it's essentially the algorithms that propel and keep our social networks moving and dangle catnip in front of our face, allow us to click in favor of confirmation bias, and leave us I think as a society, less well off than we should have. So the question now is, and actually perhaps something for the panel, is there a way to actually think of the objectives that this AI is fulfilling? Well, actually, we know what they are, right? They are making Facebook more money. But is that compatible with humans? And that's actually not clear. I think this has led to some very, what is AI in many ways is kind of systematizing things that people are good at, right? And so in some sense, humans realized that it was actually really good to use marketing in a political campaign to realize that politics and voting actually is much less rational than we make it out to be, and that you can market to a large crowd and change perceptions of people based on these marketing ideas. And this is very well documented in a book by McGinnis from the Nixon campaign. I'm just going to put some books up here that are at least flagging when this came into the public consciousness. Not necessarily, it probably happened before this, but I just want to, also good reading. The McGinnis book is a classic. I think in the 80s, we had a transformation, not just or at least we noticed in the 80s, a transformation that even news kind of had just become obsessed with being entertainment. So we had these this is where we would have the breaking news flashbacks. It became a big part of the daily news cycle to kind of have entertainment programs rather than information programs. And it's interesting, the history of television news was that it was actually written into an FCC license that you had to have a news program because they were essentially giving these companies monopolies of the airwaves. And so at least some public good had to be given back as a result. But we kind of forgot that. We lost the plot and kind of turned that into infotainment, even in the 80s. I think Merchants of Doubt, which came out only 6 or 7 years ago, showed that we were also very good as humans as kind of mass sowing doubt, kind of systematizing doubt at scale, so that we can actually have all sorts of confusion about global warming in this case, but cigarettes before that. And so now we combine this all together and let computers do that, we get the news feed. Right? And so the news feed combines infotainment with the ability to sow doubt, with just basically feeding into our own confirmation biases, because confirmation bias and what Huxley would call soma is kind of what keeps us engaged. So this is where we are, and it's a little scary, and it's completely automated, and I'm not quite sure how we move forward. One thing I will say, I don't think I would call myself a practitioner of artificial intelligence. What I consider myself as someone who does machine learning. And machine learning is very based on this idea of using supervised learning. And I would like to argue that supervised learning is in of itself somewhat problematic, actually very problematic, because when it does something we don't like, we have no way of knowing why. Introspection about these models is very difficult. So let me just put up a contrast. On the one hand, we have Maxwell's equations, right? And there they are in all their glory. There are 4 of them. And from Maxwell's equations, we actually are able to engineer everything in this room, right? We have so many things that kind of come out of understanding electricity and magnetism. And these equations are so powerful that you can even make predictions. Like Maxwell, like before Maxwell, we had no idea that electricity traveled in waves. And that was actually a prediction of these equations. We were able to actually measure that behavior. Okay? So with the contemporary machine learning models that come out of deep networks, we just get an array of numbers. We don't get equations. We just get an array of numbers that fits in the GPU memory. And maybe we can come up with clever ways to visualize them. But then these models are very easy to break, and we have no idea why. Here's one example where we have things that are classified as a centipede on my right here, and then a peacock on my left, right? So why? Why is it doing that? We don't really know why. How do we fix that? Well, we put all of this extra engineering glue on top. But we have all of these things where we don't understand why it made the mistake in the first place, and we try to build scaffolding on top of that. And I'd argue that trying to build tools into newsfeed for fact-checking and kind of to winnow out fake news is already like, we don't even know why the artificial intelligence chose to, maybe this is more a reflection of ourselves than the AI, but we don't really know what went wrong, and we try to put patches on the end. So I would also like to argue that this is, as Stuart was, that this is actually important to AI research. And it's not just AI research for people who are looking on building intelligent machines, super intelligent machines, that maybe will come about in 100 years. This is for now. We have to be thinking about what are the consequences of these things that we are putting into massive industrial production. And so I found, this is a quote from Jan LeCun that was in an interview on Quartz, saying that, doesn't make sense to deploy, thank you, I'm good though, I'm almost done. Doesn't make sense to actually deploy these models. That's not my question, I'm just a researcher. So who remembers Tom Lehrer? Oh man, not everybody, but there's a famous song by Tom Lehrer called Werner von Braun, which actually has the exact same quote in it. The exact same quote on it. Werner von Braun, the famous missile scientist, right, who was like, I don't care who I work for, doesn't really matter, right? And so I think that is a complete abdication of duty. And we can't do that. And as engineers, no matter what we are engineering, we cannot think about the technology absent its deployment. We have to be conscious of these things. We have to think about how it can be safely deployed and how it can be deployed for human benefit. I think that's a call to all of us, not just people working in artificial intelligence, but throughout engineering. So I don't really have a good proposal yet. I don't have a good solution yet. I have a couple thoughts on the solution. And one is the following. If we have something that is simply humans following rule books, this is okay to replace with robots. This is all right. Like to make an analogy back to the self-driving, if it is just having a subway going around, we're pretty good at, we can automate subways. It costs money, which is the only reason we don't do it. But you can automate subways. Cars, humans don't even know how to follow the rules exactly. Probably not good yet to automate. If you have to have introspection about humans, or that you'd actually need to build a better model, a descriptive model, something where you could draw inferences, let's not replace that with a robot yet. Probably ever. Don't replace things with robots where we don't have a full understanding of what the rules are. This might be too ambitious. This is going against Stuart. See, he was agreeing with me up until here. So this is good. This is good. And so now the question is, political discourse. I'm going to say don't replace with a robot. That's what I'm going to say. Let's not do that. Actually, if the actual discourse could be replaced with a robot, we'd all be better off. If CNN was just robots yelling at each other and robots watching robots yell at each other, we probably would be better off. But somehow having the mediator be a robot is a really bad idea. And I think that probably as a solution for technology, as a solution for technologists, we should be thinking about tools that actually facilitate conversation and not automating it. We should not be automating conversation. We should be thinking about how to make people understand each other better. So I don't know how we do this, but these are reasonable goals about bringing different kinds of people together, helping each other kind of get past communication barriers, and reducing the possibility of misunderstanding. I don't know how to do this, but to be clear, Facebook did not know how to do what it was doing either for a long time, right? There's a learning process. Well, it's going to take some time to figure it out, but I think the time is now to really start to think about maybe the internet has made our lives worse, and we should really be thinking about how it can be used to make our lives better. I don't think we could deny some massive breakthroughs in AI in the last 5 or 10 years, however long we want to chart it. 30, according to Jitendra. We have amazing ways of beating Go. The results on robotic grasping are incredibly impressive. And you know, we're only going to get better. But as we start to make these systems work, I think putting these systems in production where there are humans in the loop, we have to be thinking that, as Stuart was saying, that these things are trustable, that they're scalable, that they're predictable, and that they're going to work in all of our best interests. And that's something that I think is a reasonable goal that we can hopefully agree on. Okay, thanks.
All right, I am the last speaker on this panel, and I'm going to make this very short because, well, anyway, I was brought in here to provide some glimmer of hope, and we'll see how that works out. And I'm a computer vision guy, so a lot of what I know is that, you know, the way we see the visual world is very much egocentric, right? We are the observer, and the way we see the world is through our own eyes, and it's very hard to change this viewpoint. And so for me, I feel like in the same way we conceptualize our viewpoint, our world in this kind of very egocentric way. You know, what is egocentric? What is it for me? You know, nation-centric. What is it for America? You know, species-centric. Is this good for human race? And I think even more importantly, time-centric. You know, is it good for us in the now? So, you know, there is the statement, we live in a special time. And that statement has been around for at least a millennia. Somehow everybody always lives in a special time, right? But every time we kind of project into the possible future, it's relative to the present us, not the future us that's going to live in that special future, in that future. So, for example, it turns out that one of the first robots ever made, it was a mechanical robot. It was made in the Middle Ages. Anyone knows what it was supposed to do? It was supposed to pray. It was a monk, a mechanical monk, and its values were totally in alignment with the past us, right? But if the past us thought this would be the future, they were surely mistaken, right? But so I just give you a couple of examples of you know, why things might not be so horribly bad. So the first example is you know, there is this say, you know, Stuart had a slide, half the jobs will be gone in 20 years. Okay, that may be true, but you know, 90% of the jobs we have right now didn't exist 200 years ago, right? And in fact, a lot of the jobs that Industrial Revolution took away are now coming back. A lot of the artisan jobs are actually coming back now after being gone for 100 years of Industrial Revolution. And so, you know, from the point of the horse trader or the lamp lighter, yeah, you know, things have gone downhill for sure. But you know, a lot of the people in that era, like if we tell them, you know, what we are being paid for doing, they're like, you must be kidding. Nobody would pay for that, right? And so there is a wonderful little 70s sci-fi story, Soviet sci-fi story by Brother Strugatsky, where alien crash lands on Earth in the Soviet Union, and then of course the Soviet authorities, they make him fill out the border control card, of course, right? And so, you know, name, profession, and he writes profession, reader. And they're like, what is going on, and put them to jail. But turns out that it's true, on his planet, you know, all the jobs are done by machines, and so a lot of people become writers. But now there's a problem. Too many writers, nobody to read the books. So they decide to institute a new profession, reader. And that particular alien was, you know, specialized in romantic poetry. And, you know, a whole infrastructure, and, you know, this was written in the 70s, but now with all of these blogs and things, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And the other little anecdote or point is, you know, there is the Stuart's gorilla problem, right? But I think there is kind of two things mixing up in this gorilla problem. So in one way to look at it is that if it's from the point of view of the modern gorilla, yes, the modern gorillas are screwed because, they separated from us. They are a separate species, and we ended up being better off than they were, okay? And in that sense, they lost out. But if this picture is of the proto-gorilla, the proto-ape that was our common ancestor way back in time, then there is no problem, because that proto-gorilla, that is us, and we are them. And so it's not, it's in due course of time, by and by, things will change if we have enough time to adapt. And so, we as a human race, I think, are super lucky that we are a single species, and I think it's very important to be that, because then other species, as we get more and more technologically advanced, I mean, the gorillas, they had hair because they didn't have this artificial device to cover their skin, right? Once we have the artificial device, the hair fell off. There is artificial device here. There is an appendage to my hand right here, right? We are becoming computerized bit by bit all the time, and I think that is fine as long as we, keep being the same species. We will all enter that future together with the AI, and everything should be fine. So, in the way, it's the Beatles quote, right? All you need is love. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the panel for your stimulating and diverging opinions. Stuart, I think I'll start with a question for you. Do you want to respond to what Alyosha just said? He sort of seems to be saying, if we just keep holding hands and let it happen, everything will be okay.
Well,
it wasn't an argument against Stuart in particular, right?
I think, well, so the point with the gorilla argument is that the gorillas have no control over their own future as a species, and in my version of the analogy, the gorillas are to the humans as we, the humans, would be to super intelligent machines. And I wouldn't be happy if humans are reduced to small pockets living in protected reserves, while machines basically inherit the entire planet. And no matter how intelligent they are, the existence of those machines, at least to me, has no moral value. And I know some people out there, transhumanists and others, really, in fact, are quite happy to relinquish the Earth to superintelligent machines because they think that's a natural stage of evolution, and they're very happy that superintelligent machines are taking over and we're disappearing. I take no comfort in that future whatsoever.
Benjamin, you seem to think we have a more pressing problem.
Yes. I think it's hard to argue that we have. I don't even think Stuart would argue that we don't have a pressing problem. He's working on one aspect, but I think a lot of the ideas, even in of where Stuart wants to go, could be incorporated into our current tools. I think that's fine. I feel like we're just sometimes a little bit too enamored with ourselves in terms of technical innovation and don't think about what we're deploying before we've deployed it. I think that there are always these unforeseen consequences. The tricky part with artificial intelligence and these things of increasing complexity is that, again, when they break, we don't know why. And so I think that's actually something that I don't even know how to face, because it works very much like software engineering. When something breaks, we scaffold around it. And so the more scaffolding we pick up, then just leads to more failures. So I'm not quite sure. I don't have a good solution yet. I don't think any of us do. I just think that it's something that we should all be thinking about because it affects, obviously there was subtext that I didn't want to talk about, but I think it affects real world things.
Right. And Stuart and Benjamin, are you talking about aspects of the same problem, do you think, or are they different problems, or I don't know, does the issue that Benjamin mentioned there with newsfeed as an example, does that fit into your framework?
I think to some extent, yes, in that we've created a very, very complex IT system, the whole the whole information feeding system that we don't really understand, as Ben says, how it's working. And I think we've made short-term choices that seem reasonable. Sure, if you click on something, that means you like it, so we'll give you more of that kind of stuff. And that then, but if you ask people, do you want to be fed false information so that you misunderstand the truth about the world? They'll say, of course not. Of course not, right? I mean, they'll give a religious justification for the importance of truth or a practical justification, but they want to be told the truth. They don't want to be sold lemons by used car salesmen and poisons by snake oil salesmen and so on. And I think that actually thinking through the implicit objectives in a system design is probably not done enough, and that would be a good place to start with what Facebook is doing, as opposed to sort of adding these sort of defensive mechanisms. Okay, now we've created this monster, now we're going to sell you a monster defense mechanism on top of that.
Right. No, I agree with that very much. I think one of the other problems I think is with, now I'm going to sound like, now I'm going to make Alyosha upset, and I'll just sound like a communist. But like, one of our problems with our current system, right, is that like Facebook's objective, for the most part, is making more money and delivering to shareholders. And that also, especially with something of this scale, and something that is actually part of everybody's life and has grave, I mean, it's hard to read and disentangle how these things are, but these disinformation campaigns, I do think, have grave consequences. And, there's no regulation, there's no kind of, and I don't want to argue against some kind of net neutrality here, but it's certainly, there's nothing stopping Facebook from continuing to just advance just making money. And I'm not quite sure how we can create that incentive for them, right? So it's like human-compatible computers.
Let me
I was going to say human-compatible companies. How do we do that?
Let me respond. So, as a die-hard capitalist,
right,
who has actually lived through communism,
That's
so
right.
I have. I think there is a lot of danger in saying that you know what to optimize, right? Capitalism doesn't know what to optimize. They optimize whatever they can, and so is evolution. Evolution doesn't know what to optimize. It's just kind of bumbling by. And of course, mistakes will be made. They always have and always will be made. But I think it's very dangerous to decide on one thing, put it in gold. This is what we are going to optimize. Because, we have tried this in the Soviet Union, and that totally didn't work. Because you will always end up being King Midas, right? If you try to have the one thing and stick with this one thing that you're going to optimize, you are always going to figure out, there is always going to be something that you didn't think through. So I think it maybe is good to be more nimble and to not, and to have more plurality of views and maybe some adversarial behavior to find something that's worth optimizing.
Right. And did you want to jump in there, Stuart?
Yeah, so I think Alyosha is violently agreeing with me, because in fact I just said exactly that that being definite about the objective is exactly the source of the problem. But even if you stick with pure capitalist market theory, everyone understands that unless you take into account the externalities, you will get tragedy of the commons and all the other problems. So you'll see even Republicans now are talking about having a carbon tax, and I think the fact is that every system that we put in place has an implicit objective, but it often isn't made explicit. And if you made it explicit to say, what is really being optimized by that system design, you would say, oh my God, that's terrible, that's really ridiculous. So the whole thing about what happens with bonuses given to CEOs when the stock price goes up, but when it goes down, and the hedge fund managers who make money when their fund goes up, but they don't lose it when it goes down, right? That directly incentivizes people to take enormous risks, and this is then catastrophic for everybody. So that type of analysis can be done in a sophisticated way. But I do think that explicit uncertainty about what the objectives are and then constructing mechanisms that provide feedback to the system to indicate when actions are being taken that are undesirable, and then modify the system's model of what the objective is. That hasn't been studied very much at all, and I think it should be.
And if we bring it down to the level of, so in this room there are a lot of practitioners of machine learning and people that use this kind of stuff. So should they be changing what they do day to day because of the problems we're talking about here? I mean, Trevor on the panel before, he's working on machine vision for control of autonomous vehicles. I mean, they're very heavy robots that drive on public roads. Should he be performing a risk assessment or something as part of that research program? Is this something that you need to bake into the way people practice this profession?
Absolutely. I mean, there is no way to drive safely. So let's be completely clear. The only way to drive safely is to stay in the garage. And so when you're driving, you are implicitly making risk trade-offs all the time, right? There's a reason why we don't have a speed limit of 3 miles an hour, is because the costs of imposing that speed limit are higher than the risks that we're reducing by having a very low speed limit. So if you're driving past a line of stationary traffic that's backing up from a freeway exit that's blocked or something like that, you don't drive at 75 miles an hour next to a line of stationary traffic, because there's a risk that someone will pull out from that line. So you tend to drive at 35 or 40 rather than 75. So you're making the risk trade-off all the time. And our self-driving cars will need to be doing that too. And you can't do that unless you sort of have a model of what the costs are, right? What is the cost of having a crash, both to the owner of the car and to your brand, right? And there is this, and then you get this clear conflict actually between the value of the brand and the utility function of the individuals who are buying your cars. For example, one of the reasons why it's very difficult, so even though humans typically drive 5 or 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, and that's considered to be reasonable, and driving at the speed limit on the freeway is actually unsafe, right? It's unsafe to the individual. Why is it that the self-driving car companies are uniformly saying our cars are going to keep to the speed limit? Is because the risk to their brand of deliberately saying, okay, to the regulators, here, federal government, my car is going to break the speed limit, right? That's almost impossible to get through the regulatory apparatus, and you couldn't function as a company. So it's very clear that there's this conflict directly in the value functions of the corporation and the consumer, and that has to be resolved somehow.
Okay. And Benjamin, is there something, like here at Berkeley, for example, is there something that you can start teaching undergraduates so that when they go out into the industry and build the next Facebook, we don't end up with something like that?
I think that's
Is it an education problem?
No,
Or can
is
be
it
addressed?
an education problem? Can we address it by education? I think that there certainly are these incentive things that Stuart mentioned before in terms of brand and in terms of CEO that we can't escape from, and Alyosha says we shouldn't, which is fine. I'm not really, I'm at Berkeley now, so I think I'm supposed to be a hardcore communist, right? I'm learning. I haven't been here that long. Anyway, but I'm not. I don't really mean that. I do think that there are those kind of ethical decisions that go beyond technology, so they're not just something we should teach in computer science. But I definitely think in machine learning we should be thinking about these things. We should be teaching ethics in our machine learning class. Jitendra and I co-taught last semester, and we had a couple lectures actually on that topic. So I think integrating that into the curriculum is not hard to do. There's actually interesting research in how to make algorithms not have bias and algorithms be more fair. And as Stuart's whole research agenda is about trying to understand how to somehow engineer some sort of ethics into machine learning. So it definitely should be part of education.
Okay. Alyosha, you want to-
I think there's also a lot of the old stuff is still relevant. Doing good science, doing good engineering, not training on the test set. I mean, that is oldie but goodie. It's amazing how many people train on the test set, right? And so this is, I think, just the kind of engineering that people learn how to do over many years in the actual real hardware a lot of it has been forgotten with all this rapid prototyping. And I think just making sure that before you deploy something, you really stress test and evaluate it. I think just that by itself will go a long way.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, this is something that software has really gone away from. I mean, there is testing. I mean, obviously you can't deploy anything, but like what testing? What does testing mean? And it's not kind of the same thing that you would do if you were just trying to get one integrated circuit and make sure like, you know exactly what that integrated circuit does. And it's not even what you would do when you deploy an aircraft, right? I mean, which has also sorts of rigorous testing. Software, we don't really know. I mean, it's kind of baked into computer science itself, is that it's hard to know what these things are going to do. But I think we've punted on it too long. I mean, we should probably really be thinking about what are unforeseen consequences, and can we write tests to predict unforeseen consequences?
Okay.
TBD.
And what about for the average citizen? Like, should we be thinking about this, or like what? I don't know. I have 2 small daughters, and I've realized that I should discourage them from becoming professional chess players, Go players, and as of last week, poker players. I mean, the world they grow up in, like, what do they need to know? What should I be telling them to?
I guess one question though. I mean, there are still grandmasters.
That's true. Yeah.
We solved chess 20 years ago, and people still play it. Sudoku is something that I can solve every Sudoku puzzle that appears in any newspaper on a computer in a microsecond. People still play Sudoku. So because computers are better than us at a lot of things, doesn't mean that they're necessarily those things go away.
But no one pays you to play Sudoku.
Well, but people still get paid to play chess, right? I mean, but it was always not that many, right?
Less.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's much less of a big deal now than it was when Fischer was playing Spassky, for example. It has faded from public consciousness to a significant extent. I have 4 kids, and when I hear government officials in many major countries saying, "Oh, we're going to address this problem by instituting, lot more training and scholarships for STEM education," right? That as if somehow we need 4 billion data scientists in the world, and that's going to solve this unemployment problem that is likely to come down the pipe. This is utter nonsense. In fact, data science itself may soon, it's already becoming automated. So, the likely fact is that in a few decades' time, when most of the material needs of the population are met by machines, and we're already seeing this. Manufacturing employment is vanishing, and a lot of white-collar employment is vanishing. So this is not future. This has already been happening for 10 or 15, maybe 20 years. Once people's physical labor and mental labor is obsolete, what are they going to be doing, right? What are these jobs of the future? And Alyosha said reader, but of course there's this problem, right? And an economist, what I've advocated, in fact, is that economists and science fiction writers need to sit down in the same room, because the science fiction writers can come up with these ideas like, oh, we could all be readers, and the economists will explain why that does or does not work as a coherent economy where people actually get paid to do things and have incentives. But most people are going to be doing jobs where they are providing individual services to individual other human beings. And so essentially, after your physical and mental labor is obsolete, what's left is your humanity. And we will value that more and more, right? We can have sort of the cheap commodity robot doing things for us, but what we will really value is human contact. And so we should be educating people, at least thinking about how to educate people to provide those kinds of services. So it might not be reader, but it might be luncher, right? I could be a professional luncher. I'm a really great person to have lunch with, and people will pay for that privilege. Just like now we pay therapists, and it's sort of the same thing, except there's no food. And so that's a very different kind of economy. It's a little bit like Marin County, actually. That's sort of, I'm not kidding, you look in the yellow pages in Marin County, like 90% of the yellow pages is people providing individual services to each other. And so how do you get get money into that economy given that the productive sector is almost entirely automated, right? So we want to avoid a situation where all those people are really poor, and then the people who own the robots are the only ones who have any money. So how do you get a distributive economy that makes sense? How do you train people? Most people will be self-employed, so you should be teaching them sort of MBA skills, how to run your own business, how to get clients, there should be professionalization. How do you take these professions like luncher and actually give them status and professional standards so that the actual quality of services being delivered is much higher. Just like we train people to be electricians, we certify hairdressers, we have to do all that. And so it's a totally different picture from training a bunch of scientists for jobs that won't exist in the future.
Okay, I think we'll switch to take some questions from the floor now so that some of the people here can ask questions. There are mics roving around, so raise your hand. One right here.
I'll do that later. I think we're looking a little bit too far in the future because we have a much more immediate problem. Let's assume that 10 years from now we have truly intelligent systems that exceed the intelligence of a normal human. That might be something like a nuclear warhead. We have to design it very carefully, we have to guard it very carefully, we have to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. But long before that, today and maybe the next 5 years, we have already intelligence amplifiers. And they're probably as easy to control as guns, handguns. Okay? And what if these artificial intelligence amplifiers, fall into the wrong hands? You said that intelligence should learn human behavior, but they're bad humans, and those will make sure that their particular little intelligence they have will behave badly and learn from them. And how do we control that? And I think that's in a way the bigger problem right now.
What's an intelligence amplifier, Carly? So, what is a intelligence amplifier? What do you have in mind?
Well, basically machine learning, or maybe Cambridge Analytica.
Oh, but
you know about the fact that that is a program that probably has all of your personalities carefully figured out, and it's designed to send you personalized messages that are much more convincing. And depending how you think, it will either tell you why to vote for Trump or not vote for Clinton or do other things. And in a way, that's much more insidious because it's not one entity that you can switch off. It's distributed, and the question is, who controls it? And I'm more worried about that immediate danger of sort of these machine programs that have more knowledge than a human being by itself can have, and really applied then for maybe bad results.
So I raised the possibility, I was talking to a security researcher at a meeting, and I raised the possibility that you could use machine learning and text understanding and to find people who are vulnerable to blackmail and then develop a personalized blackmail scheme for that target. And then, of course, you have a very strong reinforcement learning signal, which is the amount of money that you make. And so you could have a very rapid increase in this automated blackmail capability. And he said, you know what, it's already being done. Yeah. It's too late. That's out there, and people are raking in a lot of money, in the billions, from doing this. So I think if you look at the situation with computer security, it's already a catastrophe, right? So there are large multinational corporations that no longer use any digital communication for transactions. They require every single transaction, tens of millions of transactions a year, to be done by fax with a voice confirmation. So that's just telling you how bad things. I can't tell you. Which one? But that's telling you how bad things are getting out there with computer security, and AI is only going to make, or is already making it worse. So that's to me the big unanswered question. So I can figure out, I think, how to make templates for provably beneficial AI systems, but I can't figure out how to make people use them. So we will probably have regulations saying that systems that have, any system that's connected to the internet, just like an app has to go through certain tests before it gets into the app store, systems will have to satisfy certain structural properties before they're allowed to connect to the internet, and so on. But how you prevent the black market and the nefarious uses of AI, that's another question. It might be that turns out to be the most important factor that ends up resulting in curtailment of AI capabilities.
Do you find that plausible?
No.
Benjamin?
No, I mean, I also don't, I mean, I feel like even some of the examples where we think that humans are able to deploy AI, I think we give ourselves almost too much credit. And it's like, people have been exploiting each other for a long time. Certainly we've made it faster. The Nigerian email scheme has been around for as long as anyone has had an email, and people still reply to that crap. People still reply to phishing emails. I mean, it's like just such dumb stuff. It's not really smart. It's dumb AI. It's so dumb. It's like, the only thing that we've made faster is like we can send more. So, okay, maybe that's something.
So,
but
we can send. So, for example, it's the second biggest source of foreign earnings for Russia.
right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
After oil, theft
Scamming.
on the internet is the second biggest source of foreign currency.
Yeah. I think I would just rather lament that we had this, in high school when I was introduced to the internet, and it was still a mosaic, and it was awesome, and all these things that you could find and research, and I really did think it was kind of like, I had a very utopian view, and man, it's just been such a disappointment. I mean, I don't know. Did you guys all think 20 years ago, you're like, yeah, this is gonna, like, I feel like it's made us dumber as a society. It's allowed us to silo like, it's supposed to connect everybody to each other, but instead we just find people who exactly are like us and allow ourselves to go into these feedback loops. It lets us get really angry, and with no vent. It puts us in these isolated boxes away from human contact. I think we have other things. I think that's something that we seriously do have to think about as a society. It's like, do we want to keep going down this path? Because I don't know where this ends up.
Okay.
So since the answer is it's not going to happen here, that's clearly wrong. We can only go to the other answer. Let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about what?
The problem that we're already having and how to fix it.
No, I'm saying I think the problem is much bigger than malicious AI. I think it's humans. I think.
Let's take
Yeah, but it gets amplified, and we have to somehow maybe try to get it under control and reel it in some way. Is there any solutions, any ideas?
Did you want to take another question?
Yeah,
Or do
let's
we
take
want to
another
respond?
question. I think that we've talked through some solutions already. Let's see if there's another question from the floor. Okay.
So I've talked to a couple of you guys already. I'm with DARPA, and we talked a little bit about it. And I think, one of the things you guys are getting wrong is that there's a sense that AI is in competition with human beings. And in a lot of times when we talk about AI, we talk about some kind of centralized, supreme artificial intelligence being that somehow takes over all the other machines in the world, and the machines all follow it blindly, right? And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. I think what we have to look at AI as is the same as any other technology. I think we're at a point in time in humanity where we need to start building technologies to help us think better. Because one of the problems you were highlighting in the internet and the data streams coming to us, we're so bombarded with data, right? That we're just incapable of actually processing it. And we don't have the ability to actually understand and interact with our world anymore. And so the role of AI should be helping us to filter the false news from the good news. The second thing we need to think about in regards to this kind of what I call advanced recommender systems is that it can't be in control of a few companies. We have to democratize AI. We have to democratize the algorithm so that the recommender is customized to what I'm looking for, my individual objectives and goals. And that's really where I disagree with Stuart. I don't know if there's a single value system that's correct. What I see in the world is potentially having lots of AIs with different biases. We all know that what we train the AI, machine learning, bias the AI, right? When you build a chess program, the type of programmer you are gives you either an aggressive chess program or a defensive chess program, right? Depending on how you write the algorithm. And so we should be building large ensemble systems, right, that gives us consensus. Because in the way we do human systems, we have lots of people with lots of confirmation bias, lots of problems or disagreements, right? And the only way we solved that in the past, we're not doing it today because we're just trying to listen to people we agree with. The way we solved it in the past was to get lots of different points of view together in a room and kind of hash it out. And so we should be looking at AI systems as not a single value system, but a way to balance out information, right? And intentionally bias the AI so that they actually compete with each other, right? And so there's not one supreme AI with one optimization function that everyone has to follow, but millions of AI systems or billions of AI systems that are working together in competition, right?
So I apologize if I gave the impression that I think there's one correct value system. No, I had a slide which says that humans are heterogeneous. And so I definitely don't want my personal assistant to have the values of Donald Trump's personal assistant. That would be terrible. And I think, you know, there are definitely problems, you know, and sociologists and political scientists and lawyers and philosophers are worried about these problems forever. The fact that not everyone can be maximally happy, right? The earth isn't big enough for everyone to be maximally happy. We can't all be king of the world, and so on. So how you deal with these trade-offs and how you understand the values of others and how you take those into account in your own preferences. I think it's a very rare person who, all other things being equal, prefers other people to be unhappy. Right? I think that's very rare, and I don't think it's very likely that AI systems would learn that type of preference system. Now, whether we need to actually put in constraints, because the drawback of that preference system where other people's unhappiness makes you happy is that it's not self-consistent, right? Because if everyone had that value system, nobody would be happy. And so we may need to put in some kinds of these sort of meta constraints that say the value systems have to satisfy certain self-consistency properties, but we definitely are never going to be in the position to be saying, look, this is the value system that everyone should have. Sure. That would be ridiculous, and in fact, that's the exact opposite of what I'm saying. The machines should learn the values of the people they're supposed to be serving, whether they're vegetarians or Shiites or whatever they are. It makes sense, you know, at least until you get to the point of the interpersonal conflict, and then there has to be some resolution. But when I'm, you know, a robot that's supposed to be cooking for vegans should cook vegan food, you know, even if I think that sucks.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Your hand was up first.
So my fear is that AI is going to erupt in a Cold War where countries use it to attack other countries. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're not going to worry so much about the computer as we're going to worry about the computer in conjunction with the other countries that are infringing on us, and we are infringing on them. And I think that's the big push. It's almost going to be like another arms race or space race. It's going to be in the AI world. And each country is going to leverage that knowledge and technology. And I did write a science fiction story like that when I was a kid, and it ends up that all computers end up being banned because they're so detrimental to the well-being of the human race, and the last vestiges of a computer is left up on Titan, teaching a kid about science because his parents are too busy. But I really have that fear that we're going to create an escalation of an arms race in knowledge, and countries and entities are going to use that to basically dominate other countries. And what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, maybe we could go down the panel just to wrap up. And, should we have some kind of international regulation and control or ban on computers?
Okay, maybe.
No.
So I think I'm going to agree with Ben here that a lot of these issues are not new at all, and they are, in a way, are orthogonal to the AI issue. For example, you know, Russia Today, you know, Sputnik, all of these Putin-driven media, it was shown that they were, for example, they were responsible for reporting news about some leak in a chemical plant on the East Coast, which did not happen, but a lot of people got scared, and it was purely kind of this manufactured news cycle, and it wasn't really, there was no AI, there was, you know, HI, that was, and it's so, I think, you know, one perhaps need to kind of separate the, you know, the fact that we are all connected and we all have all these Facebooks and Twitters and stars and likes and retweets, from, you know, the kind of the problems of, you know, learning from data and intelligent agents. And I'm not sure that they're quite the same. And frankly, those Russian hackers, you know, they are the ones that couldn't get into Berkeley. You know, they are the ones that are, Putin can pay well, but he doesn't pay as well as you guys do in Silicon Valley. So the people doing the hacking, they are not the top-notch Russian programmers. The top Russian programmers are right here. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, and honestly, I mean, I know we're laughing at this now, but I think that's like one of the, probably the most important thing we can do. And it's not just to battle malicious AI, but to battle all sorts of malicious things in the world, is to actually think about, and I guess we could just make this a call for the folks in the room and in Silicon Valley, what do we value? Like, let's actually just think about what actually do we value, right? I mean, we're in a great bubble right now. We're making a lot of money, but what do we value as human beings that intersect with society? And I think if we could just push our values, which I think are very common and shared, and we can convince other people that these are worth getting behind. I mean, we have a lot of influence here. I think that can solve a lot of the problems that we're bringing up now and a lot of the problems that face us right now. So I don't know. I think that might also be a solution to, or at least a partial way forward.
Yeah, we want AI that, one way or the other, we will make AI in our own image, whether we like it or not. So maybe if we ourselves like ourselves better, that will make us do better AI.
Yeah, so I think on the sort of information ecosystem problems, I think there's real computer science work to be done, right? You can analyze, what are the equilibria of systems where the consumers are more informed about whether they like an article than whether the article is true, right? And then, you've got the probability of retweeting and all the rest of it. You can look at the equilibria and see how bad they are, and then you can say, okay, well, what happens if we add some flags warning people that this might not be true, or the source is not trusted, so on and so forth, and look at the equilibria of those systems. So I think you could do some very simple mathematical analysis to try and figure out what is the easiest way to intervene in the current design of the system so that it has better equilibria. Because as I said, I don't think people want to believe things that are false. Even though it might make them happier to do so when they don't know it's false, as soon as they do know it's false, they don't want to keep believing it. They're not that stupid, I think. So I mean, coming back to the science fiction question, I mean, this is the story in Dune, right? So in Dune, the pre-story of Dune is that there has been a giant conflict between the human race and intelligent machines, which almost destroyed the human race. And as a result, they now have an 11th commandment, thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of man. And they do not allow anyone to build computers of any kind. So they have to train up humans to do computation work. I hope we don't get to that situation. And I think it will require a real and concerted effort, but I'm happy to report that the new Secretary General of the United Nations, one of the first things he did was to ask for a list of readings on AI. So there are some people in high places who understand the issue, take it seriously, and would like help from our community to solve these problems.
Okay, I think that brings us to time. I encourage all of you to thank the panel, and hopefully they can stick around for a few minutes to take any questions afterwards. Please all go away and think hard about whether you want to create machines in the image of man. Absolutely.
On behalf of the department, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I hope you had a wonderful day, and see you all next year.